Hi there, it's Rachel Gregg, and today I have a fun card tutorial showing how to create an Aperture card using the Darkroom Door Cheetah background stamp, Tim Holtz dies and distress inks. As you can see here, the Darkroom Door background stamps are large enough to cover a full card front, but I'm just going to be using some smaller pieces of card to stamp onto today with some distress inks. The ones that I want to use are Fossilized Amber, Wild Honey and some Rusty Hinge. I want to create a randomly coloured background with these inks, so I'm going to swipe the ink onto my non-stick craft sheet. First I'm using the Rusty Hinge in the centre, then the other inks either side. I like to make the lines of ink as long as the cardstock, and that just makes sure I've got enough ink to cover the entire piece. So now I'm just spritzing some water into the ink, and that just makes the ink a little bit more fluid, and then just placing the cardstock face down into the ink, swirling it around and lifting it up. I'm just adding a bit more water, and I'm just doing the second piece now. So for this card I've trimmed some creamy mixed media cardstock to fit onto the front of the card with enough space to leave a small border on all sides. I'll need two pieces, one for the front of the card and one for the inside. So now I'm just going to dry it with a heat tool, and if you have any excess ink just around the edges, just tap it with a cloth or a paper towel just to dab off any of that excess ink. To add some extra layers of distress, I'm just tapping down the cardstock into the leftover little bits of ink, and that just gives it an extra layer onto your background. Dry off both pieces with a heat tool and then sponge around the edges with a Wild Honey distress ink and an ink blending tool. How dark or light you go is up to you. You could use more than one colour too if you wish. Now I'm stamping the Cheetah background stamp over the darkest background using the Archival Jet Black Ink Pad. I like to ink up the stamp a few times to make sure I've inked it up completely, and then press the stamp firmly onto the cardstock. To clean up, I'm just using some stamp cleaner and wiping over the mat with a cloth. Next step, I'm adhering the stamped cardstock to the front of the card using double-sided adhesive. The sentiment I want to use is from the Wild Africa 2 rubber stamp set, and this is the set with the cheetah image, which would also be great to use with the cheetah background stamp. The sentiment I've chosen is the I'm Wild For You, and I now need a die to fit around the sentiment, and I'm using a label die from the Tim Holtz label set by Sizzix. I'll get the Big Shot machine to die cut the card. I'm using a magnetic platform which will keep the die in place, and I'm laying the die on the card and just eyeballing it where it needs to go. Run the card through the machine, and now you'll have the aperture hole at the front of your card. Sponge around the inside of the aperture using the Wild Honey distress ink and the blending tool to make it match the edges of the card. And then adhere the second inked piece of the cardstock to the inside of your card. Next I'm putting the sentiment stamp onto a block to stamp into the centre. I'm using the Archival Jet Black ink, and will keep the card closed and will stamp through the hole on the front onto the inside piece to make sure that I've lined it up correctly. And ta-da! There's the finished card. It's so quick and easy, and it makes a fun, interesting card. A supplies list is below in the YouTube description, or check out the Darkroom Door store locator page for a stockist near you. To see more stamping tutorials, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and check out the blog on the Darkroom Door website. Thanks so much for watching.